Have you ever felt tired? Not from doing too much, but from responding to too many things? Responding to texts, to expectations, to noise disguised as urgency, to people who mistake access for entitlement. It's a strange kind of exhaustion, not physical, but emotional. You fall asleep with a full inbox and wake up with a hollow feeling in your chest. You've read the books, you've followed the habits, you've listened to every voice that told you to hustle, grind, achieve. But deep down, a quiet truth whispers. Maybe real intelligence isn't about doing more. Maybe it's about knowing what's no longer worth your energy. The most intelligent people I've met aren't always the most educated or the loudest in the room. They're the ones who've mastered a rare skill, the strength to walk away, calmly, quietly, and without explanation. They don't argue to be right. They don't rush to reply. They don't over-explain. They protect their time, their mind, their peace, like it's sacred. Because it is. We live in a world that worships attention. But the wisest ones, they don't chase the spotlight. They know that clarity begins not with addition, but with subtraction. This isn't laziness. It's restraint. It's wisdom in motion. So if you've ever felt overstimulated, undervalued, or just uncentered, you're not alone, and you're not wrong to want something quieter. In this video, we'll explore 10 things intelligent people avoid and why letting go might be the smartest thing you ever do. Let's begin. 1. They avoid urgency traps. Not everything that feels urgent is actually important. But in today's world, everything is presented as if it is. An email marked urgent, a message with ASAP in all caps, a sudden request framed as a crisis, someone else's poor planning, now thrown at your feet like a fire you're expected to put out. We live in a world addicted to artificial urgency, and most people don't realize it's not speed that burns us out. It's constantly reacting to things that don't actually matter. Intelligent people, especially those who've learned through burnout, begin to recognize the difference between what is truly urgent and what is simply loud. They notice the subtle manipulation embedded in urgency culture. If I pressure you enough, you'll drop everything. If I act frantic, I can bypass your boundaries. If I create drama, I get control. But Stoicism teaches something radically different. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you seek tranquility, do less, or do what's essential, and do it with clarity." This isn't about doing nothing. It's about doing with intention and refusing to be pulled into the chaos of others. I remember a manager who lived in a constant state of emergency. Every task was a fire, every meeting a siren. At first, I adapted. I answered emails at midnight, checked my phone during dinner, and lived on edge trying to stay ahead of the next crisis. But over time, something shifted. I wasn't more productive. I was just depleted, not from the work itself, but from being in reaction mode all the time. So I began to ask myself one question before responding to anything. Is this truly urgent, or is it simply screaming the loudest? That question changed everything. I started delaying responses, not to be rude, but to regain ownership of my time. I stopped rewarding panic with instant compliance, and I began to realize most emergencies dissolve on their own when you refuse to energize them. Psychologically, urgency hijacks your nervous system. It puts your brain in survival mode, fight, flight, or fix. But intelligence thrives in a different climate, calm, grounded, deliberate. That's why intelligent people avoid urgency traps, because they know that reactive energy isn't just inefficient, it's addictive. An addiction to urgency kills clarity. They build rituals to protect their attention. They respond after thinking, not reacting. They pause, breathe, observe, then act. And more importantly, they're not afraid to let someone wait, to not respond immediately, to disappoint those who believe their needs override reality. That's not disrespect, that's self-respect. Because once you stop treating every knock at the door like a fire alarm, you begin to reclaim the rhythm of your own life. You choose depth over speed, purpose over pressure, stillness over scattered reactions. So here's the challenge. The next time someone demands your immediate attention, Pause, ask yourself, is this truly urgent? Or am I being pulled into someone else's storm? Then decide, with intention, not impulse. Because intelligent people understand, you don't have to match someone's panic to be effective. You don't have to rush to be responsible. And you don't need to fix every fire just because it's burning near you. Sometimes the wisest response is no response at all. That's not passivity, that's power. 2, they avoid identity proving. There's a silent kind of desperation that shows up in the need to prove yourself. To prove you're smart, that you're valuable, that you belong, that you're enough. It's subtle, woven into your tone of voice, into the name you drop casually, into the way you over-explain your choices in conversations that never asked for detail. And on the surface, it looks like confidence. But underneath, it's fear in disguise. Because when you constantly feel the urge to explain who you are, what you're really saying is, I don't fully believe it yet. This is something intelligent people begin to notice within themselves. Usually after years of exhausting conversations that leave them feeling unseen. You justify your boundaries, hoping others will approve. You perform your personality, hoping others will accept. You tell your story over and over again because you're afraid that silence might mean irrelevance. But here's the truth. You don't need to prove anything to anyone who truly sees you. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus once said, if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish. Let that settle. Be content to be misunderstood, to not be explained, to not be praised. Because self-respect begins where performance ends. I once knew a man who felt compelled to share his credentials in every conversation, not just to impress, but to protect himself from being dismissed. And it worked, until it didn't. Because when you build your identity on external proof, you always live one question away from collapse. What if they don't believe me? What if they don't approve? Intelligent people choose a different path. They understand that identity is not something you defend. It's something you inhabit. And you don't need to be loud to be real. You can speak softly. You can say less. You can let your actions echo while your ego sits quietly in the back. The most grounded people I've met never feel the need to explain themselves. They move with a kind of certainty that isn't arrogant, just unbothered, because they've made peace with who they are. And that peace speaks louder than any resume ever could. Psychologically, the need to constantly prove yourself stems from a fractured sense of self, from early wounds, from unmet validation, from being told explicitly or subtly that you were never quite enough as you are. But intelligence, real intelligence, begins when you stop trying to explain your worth and start choosing your peace. It's a shift, a quiet internal revolution. You stop offering lengthy justifications. You let others make assumptions. You don't chase being understood, because being understood is a bonus, not a requirement for peace. So here's the invitation. Next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause, notice the impulse, then ask, who am I trying to convince? And if the answer isn't you, stay quiet. Let your stillness speak. Let your energy speak. Let your boundaries speak. Because when you're rooted in who you are, you realize that proving is just another form of begging. And intelligent people, they don't beg for space, they own it, quietly. That's not arrogance, that's self-respect. 3, they avoid constant reaction. There's a certain kind of person who always reacts to every comment, every disagreement, every piece of news, every slight on the internet or in a conversation. They live in a constant state of defense, as if the world is a battlefield and their identity is always under attack. But intelligent people begin to see through this reflex. They learn, often the hard way, that not every moment deserves a response. Because here's the truth. The more reactive you are, the more control you give away. When someone insults you and you react instantly, they own your mood. When someone posts something offensive and you explode, you validate their impact. When every stimulus pulls you, you stop being a person and start being a puppet. The Stoics understood this with surgical clarity. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Reaction is not strength. It's the opposite. It's surrender. But we confuse reactivity with passion. We think that speaking up immediately means courage. We think that silence is weakness. It's not. Silence, when chosen with awareness, is a form of power few ever master. I once had a colleague who enjoyed provoking people. He'd say things designed to irritate, to offend, to spark debate, and I used to respond every time. I thought I was standing up for truth, but over time I noticed something. He wasn't engaging, he was performing, and every time I reacted, I was giving him an audience. So I stopped. I stopped correcting, I stopped defending. I let the moment pass. And when I no longer fed his performance, the show ended. Psychologically, reactivity comes from insecurity, from not feeling safe inside yourself. So you rush to defend the version of you think others are attacking. But when you're rooted, when you're clear, when you're calm, you don't flinch every time someone throws shade. You observe, you breathe, you respond if necessary. But mostly, you let things be. Intelligent people understand that energy is currency, and reactivity is expensive. It burns your focus, it hijacks your emotional clarity, it makes you dance to rhythms that aren't yours. So they opt out. They don't need the last word. They don't chase online arguments. They don't clap back at every passive-aggressive remark. Instead, they pause. They choose the long view. They keep their internal weather calm, even when storms rage around them. And this is important. Not everything is worth your commentary. Not every conflict deserves your insight. Not every fool is worth correcting, because some people don't want dialogue. They want drama, and the only way to win that game is to refuse to play. So here's your reminder. You don't have to react. You can pause. You can choose clarity. You can choose yourself. That's not avoidance, that's wisdom. And the most intelligent people you'll meet are rarely the ones who speak first. They're the ones who listen longer and respond less. Because sometimes the wisest thing you can say is nothing at all. 4, they avoid being everywhere. In a world obsessed with presence, there's a quiet wisdom in learning to disappear, strategically. Because being everywhere doesn't mean you're impactful. Sometimes it just means you're diluted. You show up to every meeting, you reply to every message. You're always available, always plugged in, but slowly, you stop feeling real to yourself. There's a name for this. It's called fragmented presence. Being physically present, mentally scattered, emotionally drained, and it's a silent epidemic in the digital age. Most people think being visible equals being valuable. So they fill every slot, attend every call, stay active on every platform. But intelligent people begin to notice you can be busy in 100 places and still be absent from your own life. They realize that the more you stretch yourself thin, the less of you there actually is. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't write about FOMO or Zoom fatigue, but they taught the same truth in simpler words. No person can be useful to others if they are lost to themselves. Presence is not about being everywhere. It's about choosing where your soul truly belongs. I once knew a woman who said yes to everything. Every committee, every dinner, every group chat. From the outside, she looked connected. But over coffee, she whispered, "I'm in 100 places, but I don't feel fully alive in any of them." That hit hard, because many of us are praised for being responsive, but few are taught the art of being intentional. So intelligent people begin to withdraw from the illusion of omnipresence. They stop showing up where they're expected and start showing up where they're aligned. This isn't about becoming antisocial, it's about becoming centered. They protect their presence like a sacred resource. They leave some messages unread. They miss a few calls. They skip the meeting that could have been an email, and something magical happens. Their focus returns, their peace expands, their time becomes theirs again. Because once you stop being pulled into everything, you start being pulled into yourself. There's a calm that comes from being selective, a quiet kind of power that radiates when you only give your energy where it's truly received. Psychologically, always being on creates cognitive fatigue. It weakens decision-making. It dilutes emotional bandwidth. It traps you in reaction mode. But intelligent people resist this cultural pressure. They set boundaries not to push people away, but to pull themselves back together. They no longer fear being missed. They know that their value is not in how many people see them, but in how deeply they're able to show up for the people and moments that truly matter. So here's the practice. Stop trying to be seen by everyone. Start trying to be felt by the few that count. You don't need to reply instantly. You don't need to post daily. You don't need to attend every invitation. You need stillness. You need solitude. You need sovereignty. Because intelligent people understand, sometimes the most powerful place you can be is not everywhere, but fully rooted in one place with your soul intact. 5. They avoid performing emotions. There's a type of exhaustion that has nothing to do with physical effort and everything to do with pretending you're okay, smiling when you're tired, laughing when you're hurt, acting fine when your world is quietly unraveling inside. It's the weight of performing emotions. Not feeling them, not understanding them, but performing them to keep others comfortable. And it happens more than you think. In workplaces, in families, in friendships that demand your cheerfulness, but never your honesty. The world often rewards those who pretend well, the agreeable, the positive, the always okay. But intelligent people, especially those who've been broken quietly, begin to recognize the danger of this performance. Because when you spend too long acting okay, you eventually forget what it means to be okay. The Stoics never taught people to suppress emotions. They taught us to observe them without becoming them, to feel deeply but not be ruled blindly. There's a difference between emotional discipline and emotional denial. And intelligent people learn that when your face becomes a mask, you lose more than authenticity. You lose connection with yourself, with others, with life. I once spoke to someone who was always smiling, warm, gracious, uplifting. But one evening they confessed, "I've become so good at pretending that I don't think I'd know how to be real anymore." That moment stayed with me because it reminded me we don't just perform for others. We perform to avoid confronting ourselves. Why? Because raw emotion is messy, it's inconvenient, and it doesn't always get applause. So we laugh too quickly, apologize for crying, say I'm fine when we're anything but. But intelligent people begin to choose something else. Honest restraint over rehearsed reaction. They don't over-explain their sadness. They don't force a smile when a pause would be more honest. They give themselves permission to not be performative. And strangely, it's this quiet honesty that draws people closer, not further. Because real connection doesn't come from showing your best face. It comes from showing your true one. Psychologically, the chronic need to perform emotions is rooted in early conditioning. Make others feel comfortable or you won't be loved. Don't be a burden. Put others first, always. But Stoicism reclaims emotional sovereignty. It says, feel what you feel, acknowledge it. But don't let it become your identity or your currency. You don't need to emote to prove you care. You don't need to cry to be sincere. You don't need to smile to belong. You just need to be real, quietly, softly, unapologetically. So the next time you feel yourself putting on the face, ask, am I expressing or am I performing? And if the answer feels like performance, pause, breathe, say less. Because real emotion doesn't need to convince anyone. It simply needs to be witnessed, gently, patiently, truthfully. And intelligent people, they've learned that they don't owe anyone a perfect emotional performance. They owe themselves peace. That's not cold. That's clarity. That's what it means to feel deeply without putting on a show. 6. They avoid pleasing everyone. There's a soft, silent kind of pain that comes from always being the good one. You say yes when you want to say no. You smile when you feel unseen. You offer help while quietly drowning, and people applaud you for it. They call you selfless, reliable, easy to work with. But deep down, you know something's off. Because people-pleasing is rarely about kindness. It's about fear, fear of disappointing, fear of being judged, fear that love is conditional, and you must earn it through compliance. But intelligent people, especially those who've been slowly erased by their own generosity, start to recognize this trap for what it is: a subtle, socially approved form of self-abandonment. The Stoics weren't interested in pleasing the crowd. They valued character over comfort, conviction over convenience, and virtue over validation. Seneca wrote, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." In other words, you fear disappointing others as if it's life or death, but delay your own well-being as if your time is infinite. I knew someone who never said no. Every ask was met with "sure." Every boundary was negotiable, and over time she started to vanish. Not physically, but spiritually. She once told me, "I don't think people love me. I think they love who I pretend to be for them." That's the cost, because when you please everyone, you slowly become no one. Intelligent people learn to break that cycle, not with anger, not with rebellion, but with a gentle, firm return to self-respect. They stop seeking approval in every conversation. They start disappointing the right people in service of not disappointing themselves. They learn to say, "No, thank you. I'm not available for that. I understand that upsets you, and I'm still choosing it." These aren't aggressive statements. They're declarations of emotional maturity, because real boundaries don't scream. They whisper, calmly, clearly, consistently. Psychologically, the habit of people-pleasing often stems from early emotional training. Don't upset them. Be nice. Keep the peace. But the cost of always being agreeable is invisible until it's not. It's in the resentment that builds quietly, in the fatigue that never lifts, in the life that doesn't quite feel like yours anymore. So intelligent people make peace with this. Being disliked is not a failure. It's a side effect of living with integrity. They stop editing themselves to fit rooms they've outgrown. They let go of needing everyone to understand, approve, or applaud. And they realize that the people who truly matter won't need to be pleased. They'll need you to be honest. So here's a quiet challenge. The next time you feel that tug to say yes just to keep the peace, pause and ask yourself, am I agreeing to protect them or betraying myself? Then decide consciously, because intelligent people don't say yes out of habit. They say yes when they mean it, and no, with kindness but without apology. That's not selfish. That's sacred. It's how they honor their energy, their limits, their truth. And that's how peace begins. Not in pleasing the world, but in no longer needing to. 7. They avoid self-narrative traps. One of the most invisible prisons in life is the story you keep telling yourself. I'm always the anxious one. I just attract the wrong people. I've never been good at commitment. I'm the strong one. I don't need help. I've always been like this. I can't change. These stories don't scream. They whisper in the background of your decisions, in the tone of your voice, in the way you shrink before trying something new. Most people don't even realize they're narrating their limitations. But intelligent people, especially those who felt stuck in a loop, begin to question the script. Because here's the truth. You are not your past. You are your patterns until you decide to interrupt them. The Stoics knew this long before modern psychology confirmed it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." What he meant was, you become what you repeatedly believe. And if your beliefs are outdated, borrowed, or unexamined, so is the life you're living. I once met a man who described himself as just brutally honest. But what he called honesty was really unfiltered resentment. His self-narrative wasn't truth. It was a shield. Because once a story becomes your identity, you stop being curious. You stop evolving. You start defending the version of you that no longer serves you. But intelligent people learn to say something powerful. Maybe that used to be true, but it doesn't have to be forever. They realize that transformation doesn't begin with a new plan. It begins with the courage to drop an old label. This is where Stoicism shines. It teaches that identity is not fixed. Your character is shaped by your actions, not your backstory. Every moment, you're rehearsing who you are. And every belief you choose to question, is a doorway into something freer. Psychologically, we cling to self-narratives for control, even painful ones, because at least they're familiar. I'm the broken one. I always mess things up. I'm the caretaker. It's what I do. But familiarity is not freedom, and comfort is not clarity. So intelligent people begin to write new sentences in silence. They don't announce their growth. They embody it. They show up differently. They pause before reacting in the old ways, and they say, I don't do that anymore. Not to impress, but to return to themselves. They become the kind of person who confuses people, the ones who say, you've changed. And they smile because that's the point. You're supposed to change. You're supposed to outgrow the version of yourself. That was built in survival mode. So here's your quiet invitation. Notice the story, interrupt the sentence. Refuse the label. Instead of saying, this is just who I am, try asking, who am I becoming? Because intelligent people know you are not your trauma. You are not your coping mechanisms. You are not your worst moment. You are the one choosing the next page. And if you choose it with clarity, with courage, with quiet self-honesty, you don't need to prove your transformation. You'll live it. That's not reinvention. That's remembrance. A return to who you were before the world told you who to be. 8. They avoid unsolicited advice. There's a certain kind of ego that wears kindness as a disguise. It shows up as unsolicited advice. You mention a problem, and someone jumps in with a solution. You express a struggle, and they interrupt with, here's what you should do. No pause, no permission, just advice, delivered like gospel. And most of the time, it comes from a good place, from people who want to help, from people who care. But intelligent people, especially those who've done deep inner work, learn something subtle and powerful. Giving advice without being asked is often more about control than compassion, because not every silence is a request. Not every problem is asking to be solved. Sometimes people just want to be heard, not fixed. The Stoics practice this restraint not by staying passive, but by mastering the art of presence without intrusion. Epictetus said, nature gave us one tongue and two ears so that we may listen twice as much as we speak. But in our fast-paced world, people listen only to respond, not to understand. We rush to offer solutions because silence makes us uncomfortable. We fear powerlessness, so we mask it by sounding wise. But intelligent people have learned wisdom doesn't need to be inserted into every conversation. I once opened up to a friend about a difficult season. Halfway through my first sentence, he interrupted with a 3-step plan. I didn't feel helped. I felt unseen. That's the problem with unsolicited advice. It centers the speaker, not the person in pain. It says, let me fix you, instead of, I trust you can find your own way, and I'll sit beside you while you do. Psychologically, unsolicited advice often comes from discomfort with vulnerability. It's easier to sound helpful than to sit in silence. Easier to offer solutions than to hold space. But the Stoic mind understands. Restraint is a higher form of wisdom than response. So intelligent people develop the habit of asking first, would you like support or just someone to listen? They don't assume their experience applies to everyone. They don't rush to add meaning where someone is simply trying to be real. And strangely, this humility makes them even more trustworthy because they don't weaponize knowledge. They hold it gently, quietly. They know that unsolicited advice, no matter how well-intentioned, often sounds like, I know better than you. And that's not connection. That's subtle superiority. So they choose a different path. They listen more. They ask deeper questions. They wait to be invited in. And when they do offer perspective, they do so with softness, not certainty. Because intelligent people understand, advice isn't always about having the right answer. Sometimes it's about giving someone space to find their own. So here's the practice. Next time you feel the urge to give advice, pause. Ask yourself, is this about them, or is it about me needing to feel useful? Then choose your next words carefully, or don't speak at all, because in a world full of noise and opinions, being the person who simply listens is a rare and powerful form of love. That's not silence, and that's presence. And in Stoic terms, that may be the greatest offering of all. 9. They avoid chasing noise. There's a modern addiction that rarely gets called out. It's not to caffeine or sugar or even social media. It's the addiction to noise. Constant stimulation, constant updates, constant access to everyone's thoughts, opinions, and anxieties. It's the need to know everything, to react to everything, to never sit in silence for more than a moment. And it's silently wrecking your ability to think clearly, to feel deeply, to just be. But intelligent people, especially those who burned out on information overload, begin to make a different choice. They stop chasing noise. They start choosing stillness. You don't have to scroll the news first thing in the morning. You don't have to keep up with every headline, trend, or viral outrage. You don't have to comment, reply, or consume in real time. You can disconnect. Not from the world, but from the chaos that pretends to be important. The Stoics would have recognized today's attention economy for what it is: a war on focus, a hijacking of peace, a society that profits when you forget how to sit with your own mind. Marcus Aurelius didn't have notifications, but he did write, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And in today's terms, that means power is knowing when to log off. I once knew someone who kept the news running in the background 24/7. When asked why, they said, "If I don't know what's happening, I feel out of control." But here's the irony. They weren't informed. They were overwhelmed. They weren't in control. They were spiraling. Intelligent people see through this illusion. They recognize that most noise is not nourishment. It's agitation. It distracts but doesn't clarify. It stimulates but doesn't satisfy. So they start curating their inputs like they curate their diet. They consume less but more mindfully. They guard their attention like it's sacred. Because it is. Psychologically, constant exposure to noise weakens your capacity to reflect. It keeps your nervous system in a low-level fight or flight. It prevents depth. It short-circuits creativity. And worst of all, it normalizes mental restlessness. But Stoicism teaches the opposite, that silence is not emptiness. It's a space for insight. When you stop chasing every update, you start hearing something deeper, your own voice. You remember what you believe, not just what you're told. You feel what you feel, not what others project. You return to yourself. And that return, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, it's slow, it's deeply, undeniably powerful. So intelligent people do something radical. They turn notifications off. They leave some conversations unanswered. They walk without headphones. They drive in silence. They sit, just sit, without needing to input something. Because they know that in a world addicted to noise, stillness is not a weakness. It's a superpower. And while others chase headlines, they chase clarity. While others react, they reflect. While others drown in volume, they find peace and restraint. So here's your practice. Don't just declutter your room, declutter your mind. Because intelligent people understand, you don't need more input, you need more integration. And you don't need more noise, you need more quiet. That's not ignorance, that's intention. And in this world, it just might be the highest form of wisdom. 10. They avoid emotional gambling. There's a quiet form of gambling that doesn't happen in casinos. It happens in conversations, in texts, in relationships. It's when you place your peace on the line, hoping someone else will protect it. You send the message dash, then wait anxiously for a reply. You share your vulnerability, then pray it's not ignored. You give your loyalty to people who haven't shown they can hold it, and you wait, refreshing, checking, wondering. This is emotional gambling, and most people do it without knowing. Not with money, but with self-worth. But intelligent people, especially those who've been burned, learn to stop placing bets on inconsistent people. They stop giving their energy to those who haven't earned access. They stop chasing closure from the ones who benefit from their confusion. They stop needing emotional returns from relationships that only withdraw. The Stoics taught that peace is internal. It doesn't come from others giving you what you hope for. It comes from not needing it in the first place. Epictetus said, If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, you gave them the chips. You sat at the table. You played a game you didn't need to play. Emotional reactivity often feels like connection, but it's usually just unhealed attachment. And intelligent people begin to see the difference. They don't stop feeling. They stop bidding. They stop handing over their inner peace like it's negotiable. They learn to sit with discomfort without immediately outsourcing it to someone else's validation. I once spoke with someone who said, "I realized I wasn't waiting for him to love me. I was waiting for him to make me feel lovable." That's emotional gambling, and it always costs more than it returns. So intelligent people recalibrate. They ask, is this person emotionally consistent? Or am I just addicted to the hope that one day they'll be different? They stop playing tug-of-war with people who let go without warning. They stop testing their value on people who never saw it clearly. Psychologically, emotional gambling stems from scarcity, from childhood dynamics, from the fear that peace has to be earned through suffering. But Stoicism teaches a new model. You don't have to chase peace. You choose it, and then you protect it. You set boundaries not to control others, but to safeguard your emotional ecosystem. You stop over-investing. You stop over-explaining. You stop proving. Instead, you start observing. You let time reveal what words conceal. You let silence show you who respects your energy. And most of all, you reclaim the emotional wealth you once gave away so freely. That's not detachment. That's discernment. So the next time your peace depends on someone else's response, pause and ask, am I gambling or am I grounded? Because intelligent people don't play games with their hearts. They hold them gently and only offer them to those who have shown they can hold them too. That's not emotional withdrawal. That's emotional wisdom. And in a world that tells you to pour endlessly, choosing to hold your own cup might just be the bravest thing you do. So here we are, 10 things, 10 invisible habits, 10 forms of quiet discipline that separate the reactive from the resilient, the loud from the wise, the busy from the free. And maybe if you've made it this far, you're starting to feel it too. Not as a rush, not as inspiration, but as something deeper, a slowing down, a gentle returning. Because here's the truth, plain and undramatic. You don't need more to become more. You need less proving, less reacting, less explaining, less chasing. The world wants you to stay plugged in, triggered, impressed, exhausted, performing, but intelligence, real intelligence, has no desire to keep up with the noise. It listens to something quieter, clarity, integrity, peace. And Stoicism reminds us of this again and again, that you are not free until you master what you give your attention to, that you are not powerful until you stop being pulled by every impulse, that you are not wise until you stop needing to be heard, just to know that you matter. You do matter, whether you speak or not, whether you're liked or not, whether you're fast, loud, or impressive. Your worth is not in how the world sees you. It's in how quietly you carry yourself through a world that forgot how to be still. So if any part of this spoke to you, don't just nod and scroll. Reflect, reclaim, begin again. Begin a little lighter, a little less reactive, a little more rooted. You don't have to get it perfect. You just have to get honest with yourself, with what you allow, with what you walk away from. Because intelligence is not about how much you say. It's about how well you live. In the space between what you know and what you choose to ignore. Walk that space gently. That's where the Stoic lives. If this video helped you slow down, if it gave you a breath of clarity in a world that rarely pauses, leave a comment below with, "I choose peace." That's all. No long paragraph. No need to explain. Just one simple signal that you're choosing to live differently. And if someone comes to mind, a friend, a colleague, someone who's been overwhelmed lately, send this to them, not as advice, not as a fix, just as a quiet offering, a reminder that they're not alone in wanting something more still, something more real. If you'd like more videos like this, modern Stoic reflections, spoken softly but lived deeply, you can subscribe and tap the bell. Not for hype, not for noise, but so you don't miss the next time we meet here, in this space where clarity breathes and noise dies down. Until then, be well, walk slow, stay rooted, and as always, stay stoic.